Welcome to Live, Work, Stay with Billy Kay. I'm Billy Keisling, the mayor of Beaufort. Today we have a great show. I've got City Manager Bill Prokop who's going to be joining us, and we're going to talk about something called the budget. And we're going to try to talk about it in a lot more depth than you will read about it in the newspapers or here on the street. Just stick around, we'll have a good show. Today I have with me Beaufort City Manager Bill Prokop. And Bill, I thought it would be interesting for us to talk a little bit about the budget.
Okay.
We hear people say no taxes. We hear people say no fees. But we really don't have people talk about the budget the way we talk about it. We spend 3 months going through a process of department by department. Council members even visit the departments. And for us, the budget for city council or a county or a state for that matter, or the federal government, what a budget really does is commit you to a certain direction in terms of meeting the needs of the citizens.
Correct.
The other half of it is, where does the money come from? And how do you make sure that you don't spend more than you do? During this year's budget, with probably 3 work sessions, a public hearing on the budget, and a first and second reading, not one citizen came and commented on the budget. I'd like to think that it's because they think we're doing a good job. I'd rather believe that it's because as long as you're not going to tax them, they don't really care about the details. And it's so important because the details are what it's really all about. This year, for example, you recommended a $35 per vehicle fee to pay half of the costs of what we spend on maintaining state-owned roads, sidewalks, stormwater services. I voted for that. I was in the minority, and council didn't accept it.
Right.
But I voted for it not necessarily because I wanted the fee, but I think people have to understand that we're managing their money, we're setting priorities for their city, and there needs to be more accountability, and they need to understand.
Correct.
So I thought maybe you could help me tell the public a little bit about first of all, you can't do anything if you don't have money.
Correct.
So our sources of revenue for the city.
Well, I think it's a good point, and the topic is good. And like you, I'd like to believe that everyone's really happy with what we're doing, and therefore they didn't show up. But I don't think that's the case. I think it is important for people to realize what's behind the budget. And I think and I'm talking for myself and council, are proud this year that I believe in this whole area we had the smallest increase of any taxing authority. Ours was 0.96, not quite 1 mil, versus others, even fire districts, had 2+. So we tried to do a good job. Basically, our revenue comes from several sources. First of all, our property taxes, which is about $4.5 million. Second, our business license, which is about $3.5 million. Then we have, and I've got a sheet over here, and look, we have franchise fees that come in about $2.5 million. And we have other fines and forfeitures, etc., about $2.5 million. And through these various fees, and there's some other miscellaneous ones, it's about $17 million comes in revenue. And the key, which we've had many discussions over the last 2 years about for us, is where we see the growth is our business license fee, which is very important, and the A-tax funding and hospitality taxes that we get. So our total budget with funds interest, which is minimal now, and the revenue that we got from refinancing our bond, our total budget came up to $19,387,000. So, but it's a balance of resources. What we have not had, and we're hoping that we've sort of reached the peak of the mountain now, is we haven't had the growth of bringing in additional taxes. We haven't had the commercial growth. But with just what we have on our plate right now in front of us, between the Walmart development, Harris Teeter possibly coming in, the new Publix that was recently opened a year or so ago, and now some new hotels coming on, that we'll start to see that change. But the impact on taxes or revenue is still at least 2 years away before we see it. So that's our revenue side. On the expense side, like every municipality or local government agency, our biggest expense is public safety. And in our particular case, we're looking at a police department. Our expenses for our police department is roughly $4.5 million. Our fire department's about $4 million. And then I would just say that all of the other departments, which includes planning and code and building inspection and every department, administration, HR, is the balance. But
Sure. What I just think I heard you said, my math's not as good as yours, but if you put the property tax and the business license together, that is pretty much absorbed with public safety.
Public safety cost exceeds it.
So
Correct.
that we're looking at at other revenues from the A tax and the accommodations tax and the hospitality tax, which we get very little of, to franchise fees. And the government, state government has created a local government fund, but we're funded at I think 72%.
About 72% of what we should be
So
getting.
over
is what we get.
$100,000 of money.
Correct.
They passed a law that said we're going to give the cities money, and they're not giving us that.
They're not giving us the
100,000.
full amount.
But the biggest burden that they put on us, meaning the state, is that they have all of these assets out there. When someone falls on a cracked sidewalk at 10 o'clock at night and calls me and say a lot of curse words, "Why can't you fix the sidewalk?" I said, "Do you know who owns the sidewalk?" And this person, relatively educated, informed person, said, "Well, the city." I said, "No, that sidewalk belongs to the state."
Correct.
And it's the state's responsibility to maintain it. Now, what does my good city manager do? The next day, he bites his lip and he sends somebody out because he won't let that dangerous crack stay there because we can't let people fall. We have people who call us and their yards are flooding because the stormwater system isn't working correctly. And I say, "Well, where's the water coming from?" And they say it's coming from a ditch, or it's backing up out of a city drain. And I said, "Well, do you know who owns that?" And they said, "Well, the city owns that." And I said, "No, that belongs to the state."
Right.
And you end up spending $60,000 for a special piece of equipment that even the state office down here doesn't own.
Correct.
To go and dig the roots out of a pipe where the oak tree roots have integrated into an old system.
Correct. And I think to add to that, none of this is really new. Just this past 2 weeks, a major contractor in town brought to our attention about a stormwater issue down in the Point area that he mentioned that he looked at 8 years ago. And it is a state problem. It's exactly what you said. It's a crushed drain. But for 8 years, it hasn't been fixed. And now it's starting to move out into the street, which is a city street. And it's starting to create cracks in the street. But it's a problem that it's existed. The state acknowledges and looks at it, but says, well, we don't have any funds to fix it. And you can go on to the, as you say, this year we had to cut out some things that we wanted to do. You go right now down on the corner of, I believe it's Bladen and Charles, or about Bladen and Craven, and the sidewalk's all sunk in. It's a state road, but someone's going to see that and say exactly what you say is, well, it's the city's fault to fix that. So we're spending and have been spending over $700,000 a year repairing that. Just one thing alone, we contract the company that brings in the vac truck to do the drain cleaning. That's $60,000 the last 3 years we've spent on it. And probably more than 80% of the work is on drains that are in state roads. So the state local agency wants to work with us and helps out and is cooperative, but their hands are tied with both money and equipment. So it's a real problem for all municipalities. Today's local newspaper, letters to the editor. Not in our community, but down in Bluffton, somebody's writing, which I've said before, they're really upset that at 278, where 170 goes towards 46, the median hasn't been cut since they planted it there. And it's, again, it's today's newspaper, and their comment is the DOT doesn't do anything. They cut it once a year. It looks terrible. We spent millions of dollars.
You look at the new Highway 46 from 278 over to the Circle, and it's like there's a forest there.
Correct.
And, you know, I know the state doesn't have money. I know they've been debating it for a number of years. I was in the state legislature, and I was probably guilty too. It's only since I became part of local government, where the rubber hits the road, where the people called me, as I've come to think about that. So when legislators say no taxes, they ought to also be looking at the issues that they're not dealing with, because they're not day-to-day issues. I get a call, I call you, something gets fixed. We got to take a break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm with Bill Prokop, the city manager of the city of Beaufort, and I have to say a very good one, who seems to be on top of everything. We're talking about the budget still.
Right.
And one of the biggest crunches that on the city and on all cities, as Bill was saying, is the burden of inaction within the state government to maintain their assets, which threaten the public safety and health of our people. You were talking about.
Absolutely. This morning's news that I saw on television, South Carolina, I believe, was number 6 of having the worst road and infrastructure conditions in the country. That our roads and infrastructure are so bad that we're, as I said, I believe it was number 6, it might have been number 5. That's not a good record to be on.
No.
And we've got to start to, as I said, it's not just Beaufort, but it's a problem. And if we want to create economic development, we've got to have the infrastructure. Everybody, and it's the great thing of saying, okay, we're going to get the ports, whether they're Savannah, expanding Charleston, or Jasper County. If we don't have the infrastructure for when those ships unload and the trucks start rolling, our infrastructure is not just going to be in trouble, it's going to crumble. And we've got to start facing those issues statewide.
One of the things I didn't say, for those out there who don't think about this the way we do, is that the state has capped our property tax.
Correct.
So even if we wanted to, even if the public was willing to pay a little more to get a little more, we can't do that.
Right.
The second thing is that they put a burden on businesses, renters, and second homes when they throw more percentage, a larger percentage of the cost of funding education to houses people don't live in full-time, to businesses, and to renters, because the costs are passed on through the property owner. And you know, it's a growing problem. When I left the legislature, they were just about ready to do the first penny sales tax in Beaufort County, and it was to widen Highway 170. And a lot of people were not happy with me because I opposed it. I wasn't opposed to widening Highway 170, but what I was opposed to is to the state that brags upon its tourism and the importance of tourism in the industry won't make the infrastructure investment that we need for tourism that they might make if they're building a factory in another county. And I said at the time, I said, if we pass this penny sales tax, if we start building state roads for the state, the burden is going to fall on us more and more and more. As it turns out, it was defeated. Second time it came up, and the arguments about public safety and the number of accidents were just so compelling, I couldn't stand on principle. Well, here we are again. We're going to be looking at a penny capital sales tax for a limited period of time to pay for specific things. But most of the things we're paying for are paving roads on Hilton Head that aren't paved, paving roads all over Beaufort County that aren't paved. Bridge study about the future of the bridge to Hilton Head that brings in a gazillion dollars.
Infrastructure projects.
Infrastructure, it's all infrastructure. Now some of it, like the Waterfront Park extension, would normally be our responsibility.
Right.
The parking garage would be ours, but there used to be federal grants for these things as well. I mean,
Right.
that's how the Waterfront Park was originally largely funded. But we do have a penny sales tax coming up, and it's a question about whether the people really understand that it's generally about public safety, quality of life
Correct.
issues. Should we be paying for them? I wish we weren't. Do we want our community to grow and prosper, to have our streets cleaner, to have a bigger, better waterfront park, which is certainly the attraction of the region that serves everybody? Yes. Do we want to finally bite the bullet and deal with a parking problem that's been with us since the 1930s? We do. I guess it's a question of how we sell it, how we explain it to the public. But if they're not looking at our budget, you know, I'm a little worried that they won't give us the time.
And it's the same in the penny sales tax. I think almost 10%, 12 million or thereabouts for the sheriff for updating our communications equipment. And if we don't pass the penny tax, that's going to be a burden on all of us as taxpayers because it has to be upgraded. So it's important that there be that balance. And I think in the future, the county has to definitely start to look at the local option sales tax so that we have some flexibility because, as you mentioned, our hands are tied by the state of what we can do with taxing revenue.
Right.
So it's all very, very important. And the same thing, you mentioned it, that with the new taxes that are just been passed by both the school and the county, businesses' taxes now are going to increase. And again, we're trying to get economic development going, and we're taxing the businesses that are going to create the jobs that help the economy. So we're constantly
creating a disincentive to do what we want. Well,
Yeah.
very happy that the City Council and the Redevelopment Commission is taking the lead, because I think I said this morning to a group of middle schoolers that we've probably done more towards addressing the promise of a brighter future for the young people who grow up here with the digital corridor connection with Charleston, who will mentor us and lead us through that project.
Right.
You know, if you're really worried about property taxes, get more businesses. Broaden that base so that other people are paying taxes, but also better jobs means the housing market recovers faster, and we don't end up with this split market of only those who come here can afford certain homes and those who live here can only go to a certain level. But the budget, you know, I've just read headline after headline, and it's always taxes up, taxes not going up, raise it a mill, 3 mills. People are upset about funding the school because they're angry at the superintendent. When you think about the budget, think about how you run your home. I know that's an oversimplification, but you got a certain amount of money, you got a certain amount of obligations, and hopefully there's a difference that you have a little more money than you have obligations.
Correct.
So that you can grow and you can do that you can add on to your home, you can put more money into fixing things. But I think unless you've worked in a number of states, have a magical answer.
I don't have, and I think the other thing the public has a hard time understanding is the fact is that our hands are further tied with funds that we have. We cannot just take, I mean, basically most of our operations, I'll say 80, 90%, come out of our general fund where our taxes go on our business license. But yes, we have money put away for our land fund. We have money for our redevelopment. But we can't just take money out of those because those are special dedicated funds just for that purpose. A lot of people said, well, how come we're taking in and purchasing Siegel and some of these? Well, that's out of a completely different fund. And the same with Boundary Street project. People still think we're hitting the taxpayer for that cost. That's grant money, impact fees. as well as TIF $2.
And the last penny sales tax.
And the last penny sales tax, so that the taxpayer isn't being hit.
Right.
And I think it's a perfect example, Boundary Street. That project's 11 years in the making. It wasn't something that just started yesterday or last year, and that it's a city council project.
But it is going to be finished in 18 months, right?
It's going to be finished by the end of 2017. Might be carryover if the weather's bad to finish the asphalting, but we're hoping not.
And
But
on budget and on time.
right now, we're on budget, we're on time, and we're keeping a good watch on it, and hopefully people will see a big improvement in that project come the end of July when the new intersections working and the new mass traffic light arms are up.
Right. I think as soon as we begin to see some visible progress, you know, we've spent $5 million, but it's all underground.
That is correct.
And so people don't really see it. You know, in closing, I guess I would just remind the watchers that that they really ought to take a little more interest because we are entrusted as city government with your dollars. Our goal is to first maintain your health and your safety. And then we have to take care of infrastructure, and then we have parks and all that. But remember, for every dollar that we collect every year in taxes, we can tell you, you can actually go online where we have through OpenGov.
OpenGov on our on our website in the finance department.
You can go in and see almost in a real-time basis what we're spending on everything from insurance and benefits for employees to the capital projects that we buy out of the capital projects fund. So, you know, let's have a conversation about the budget next year. Meanwhile, again, I hope you're trusting us by not complaining. We're moving forward. We thank goodness for a staff that was able to sharpen the pencil, and department heads who are willing to defer things. I will say that, and I know I'm running out of time, is that one of the needs we are meeting this within the next year is we are adding the 4 additional police officers. With the growth of commercial on Ladies Island, it's time to have a stronger presence on Ladies Island. And we also know that our neighborhoods need more attention from the officers who are out there in their cars and on the streets. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Bill.
Well, thank you for having me.
I hope we taught some.
Well, as you say, people go on our web, OpenGov gives them all the financial information, but I think the most important thing, we also have an open door. People have questions, want to come in, we're here to answer their questions. That's what we're paid for, and we're part of the community. We want to be.
Thanks for what you do, and thanks for being here with me.
Thanks for having me.